Sure. Mr. Herga, how can home solar and home energy storage contribute to Americans' energy needs and grid resilience?
So it can play a role as an intermittent source to offset the cost of energy, or to provide, at some points, a payback of distributed generation back to the utilities. But on average, it is not going to make a dramatic difference. In particular, with the 20% load growth that we're going to see year over year, it almost becomes a least economical way to put the solar panels on a house with the transmission that would then have to reverse back into the utility. There's a far better way to address. If the goal is for zero carbon emission projects, there is a far more efficient way to do it. We have to stop pretending that these things that are of a smaller scale are somehow going to address a larger problem.
And how can energy resilience programs for single-family homes contribute to people keeping their lights on during extreme weather? This is, this is a big deal in the state of Florida as well, and part of the reason why it's a pretty bipartisan issue we've seen on home rooftop solar and people wanting to become energy independent within their own home.
So the cost of energy is oftentimes, and the cost of these 20 to 30% it takes to build a project is often passed down to the ratepayer. It becomes this intangible cost that is spread over many ratepayers, so we don't see that the kilowatt per hour goes up a half a cent a year or half a cent a month. Because we're not transparent about how that project actually gets from generation to the house, the cost increase is because, to give you an example, there were 5 to 6 large-scale renewable transmission lines that were almost permitted at the end of the Trump administration, and Carmel Hickory Creek, 10 West, and many others, that still took another 3 to 4 years. If we can't build the infrastructure, if we can't build the new KV lines to get from 115 to 230 to 530 that actually reduce cost and efficiencies, then what are we doing here?
Dr. Cletus, as the only economist among our witnesses today, how confident are you in Trump's promise to cut energy costs in half in the next 500 days?
If that promise is predicated on what we've seen in the last month, I fear not at all. That promise will not be met. And unfortunately, in the interim, many people around the country are going to suffer from higher energy costs, lost jobs. Businesses are suffering from uncertainty in the marketplace. This is actually really taking the economy in the wrong direction. So I hope there will be a reversal of some of those early day announcements.
Yeah, and I want to get an idea of how abandoning our clean energy future will actually mean higher bills for folks. I mean, number one, there's nothing worse for your bank account than completely losing your job. And a lot of these executive orders are aiming to abandon clean energy investments and projects. I actually, agree with what Mr. Hergot said as well, in terms of if we've already made this investment to begin something, when we abandon it, I would say we're misusing a lot of taxpayer money, and we're not going the direction we need to go into. But abandoning these clean energy investment means that Americans are going to lose their jobs. And I've spoken with trades really around the country, but especially in my district, people who are at work right now because of these investments we've made. How could that harm America's clean energy leadership moving forward?
The reality is we are on the cusp of what could have been an incredible evolution, and we can still capture that bright future if we continue to make these investments. The Inflation Reduction Act has only been a couple of years into implementation, and already we've seen hundreds of thousands of jobs, so many manufacturing facilities in the Southeast, all around the country. That is an incredible opportunity for the communities that live there, and that's why there's bipartisan support. We've seen letters sent to the Speaker from the Republican side as well, saying, please don't stop these investments because they're helping drive jobs and innovation. When we look at the world of the future, it's moving towards a clean energy world. The U.S. should be at the forefront of that technological revolution. Let's not cut ourselves out.
What states would be mostly impacted?
Well, if we look at the states that are getting the investments right now, there are places like Alabama, there are places like Kentucky, there are places in the Southeast that are they're getting on a percentage basis a much greater amount of these investments. They've built battery plants, they've built EV manufacturing. So these clean energy jobs are everywhere in the country, but some parts of the country had been lagging, and they're now getting a chance to take advantage of this incredible opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate bringing that up. I mean, and globally, in terms of being a global player, we get most of our energy from oil. And part of the purpose of moving towards this new green economy and clean energy, of course, is cutting emissions because of the climate crisis, but also having more diversity in our energy mix, which is important for resiliency as well, and lowering costs. So thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, for 5 minutes.
In regard to the cost of renewables versus hydro